Good afternoon. Welcome back to another rendition of the B&H virtual event space. Today, we are talking motion. We are talking magic. We are talking about taking motion and turning it into magic. And for that, we have the master of motion magic, Scott Robert Lim, Sony Artisan of Imagery. Scott, I kind of jumped the gun. I cheated. I practiced what you're going to be teaching today. I practiced it the other day.
Really?
I mean, look,
Try it.
I had to try it. I wanted to come into this with some kind of baseline of where I was at. It's such a freeing concept. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping to learn a whole bunch, as I know I always do from you. So welcome back. First of all, it's great to have you on as always, and a huge welcome to all of our viewers out there. But as I've so eloquently stated already, I'm not the expert on this. Scott is going to help me out. He's going to help you out. This is something that really can just open up the expanses of your creativity. So Scott, I'm going to let you handle it from here. Of course, a huge welcome to everybody joining us on our YouTube live stream. If you don't know about it, go on YouTube, check out B&H Event Space. And if you guys do have any questions at all, feel free to get them into the comments section and we'll ask Scott. So Scott, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Honestly, I don't know a lot about this, but during COVID or the pandemic, I wanted to learn video. And so I made it, I wanted to do this concept of pulling frames because I believe that this is literally the future. And it's going to go in that direction. I know it's a little bit early for some people, but in 5 years, this is going to be common practice, especially as technology gets better and better. But I had to really learn this stuff too, because video is so different than stills. And I'm going to share all this information with you. I want to let you know that every photo that you see in this presentation is a pulled still. And I am going to share you my magic hybrid settings, which I believe works the best for doing both video and stills. So get ready for that. So I'm going to start this off with a little bang here. Now, this is actually literally a 2-second video clip that I took. I took a super strong Stella light, shined it on, I was in an arboretum, shined it on a flower. And for some reason, when strong light is on a flower, bees get attracted to it. And so they'll just fly right to it. So as I was recording it, but unfortunately, I literally just got that much, 2 seconds. Now that doesn't seem like anything really, like, wow, what could you use that for? What could you use that for? But I went back and I pulled a still from it, which was like totally amazing to me that I was able to get that. And then in Photoshop, do my magic, boom, totally usable image from something that I just thought was a castaway video. And so I'm thinking, when you do video, you're going to discover more bangers when you go through your video files and go, oh, shoot, this is usable. This is usable. And it could change the way you're shooting. So let me do another one here where I'm rolling some video in 4K. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just hitting the video button, just rolling stuff, right? And I'm making her laugh, and I got a little video clip. It doesn't look like much, right? But as I go through it, I find this still that it's just boom, perfect, right? Because I'm shooting 24 frames per second. And then I taken that, doing my usual Photoshop magic, boom, I got a usable image. And from that same clip, I like this still. I got, well, that looks cool too. So I did the same thing. I pulled it, edited it, boom. And it's an 8K video, but what I decided to do is just double the size. And now Adobe Photoshop has these neural filters where you can go in there and just double the resolution of something. And through AI, they will up the resolution. Now it's a 32 megapixel file from a frame. I mean, I would be comfortable printing that anywhere, showing it anywhere. If any magazine wanted to print it, I would give it to them. Totally professional use. So I just wanted to, boom, show you that right off the bat. If this is all you listen to, then you want to just go for it and try it. That's good. I got a tons more to share, but I wanted to show you how you can do it. Now, you can actually do a lot of this and pull frames right in your camera. And so they have programs, right? Like the Sony cameras, which I'm going to show, you can you can locate the frame and then extract it. So I'm going to show you how to do, I recorded myself here, where you just get the video, you hit the play button, and then as soon as you hit the play button, you hit the down button on the dial, right? That down button right there. And it brings up this other menu. And if you look at that other menu, it has that extract frame from video right there. It's just sitting there right there for you. So you scroll over to that and you go into that menu. And it brings up all this other stuff where you can locate that frame that you want. You could do it in a different ways. You could tap the screen. And once you locate the frame, you hit the down button and it saves it. So here I'm trying to, let's say I'm trying to locate the frame. I can just tap on and off the screen to stop it. Or I could hit the right dial button, and I could go frame by frame and try to find what frame I want. Or if I hit the up button there, it'll just play it in slow motion and I can find where I want to get it at. And once I find it, I just hit the down button, boom. There's the frame, and it puts it right in the camera. So you can see here, I'll show there's the video, and then there's the frame right there. So you can just, on your downtime, look through videos, get your frames and download it straight. And then when you upload everything to your computer or wherever, you'll have those individual stills already taken out for you. Okay, so that's how you do it in the camera. But if you want to do it in the computer, of course, there's Final Cut. If you have a Mac, you could do it in that. There's Adobe Premiere. You could do it in that. You could even do it in iMovie. But guess what? That's even way too complicated for a simpleton like myself. What I like doing is using my $2 program that I got, and I'm sure the PC has tons too. It's called Frame Grab. It costs you a whopping $2. Now, you could get the free version for free on other stuff, but the reason why it's free is that you can't get full 4K grabs. You can only do 2K grabs out of it. But this one, for $2, you could get 4K out of it. It's simple and easy to do. And I'll show you how easy it is. Okay, so here it is. I'm pulling it into Frame Grab right here. And this is what it looks like. And what I love doing on the bottom, I play at half speed. So it's at slow motion. Since I'm had a higher frame rate, it'll play it back slower. And I just start playing it after I lower the speed. And I try to so it's easier for me to locate that exact frame that I want, right? And then when I kind of get close to where I want it to go, I hit pause, and then I do frame by frame. And I just keep clicking it until I get that nice frame that I feel that's pretty cool. So I'll come in and I'll go, okay, boom, that's the one I want. And then up in the upper right, you see an export button, right? So you hit the export, then it's going to bring up these options. So you could call it, it takes the file name of the video and then adds the exact location onto it. So you don't get duplicate files, which is great. Then you can save it as a JPEG, a PNG, or a TIFF. JPEG's probably the lowest quality, but I do it at best, which is fine. You can see the resolution there is 4K. And I just go ahead and save it after I put it down to my desktop or wherever you want to save it to. Boom, I save it there. And then you can see the JPEG. I save it to my desktop. Sorry, my desktop's very messy. And so there's the still right there. I can pull it in, take it into Photoshop, Lightroom, whatever, ready to go. And I've been having a great time with that and realizing, man, I'm just getting more winners doing this, even from video clips that I don't think I'm going to able to get an image. I'm able to get a nice image that I will use anywhere. So I want to tell you the future, and really video is the future. And I looked up some stats. Everybody should get into video. Everybody should start to become a hybrid shooter, because one, video is 82% of all internet traffic in 2022. It's probably even more now. 82%. 100% increase in mobile video views each year. 100%. It is just like going leaps and bounds. 8 billion video views per day on Facebook. 86% of businesses use video as a marketing tool. So if you're not learning how to do it, you're losing out on money. Okay, because everybody's using, all businesses are, and they're going to hire you to do it. Now, let's look at the future job rate. Now, this was really compelling to me. Okay, so let's take photography, for example. Let's say a service in 2013, whatever that service is, maybe it's shooting a wedding or whatever, was $1,000. What is that dollar amount in 2023? 1,007. It only went up $7, lower than the rate of inflation. But let's take that same item that cost $1,000 with video. In 2013, you paid for a certain service that cost $1,000. Now, how much would you pay for that same service in 2013? Look at that, $1,300. You're making a lot more money with video than you are with photography. In fact, with photography, you just lost 30%. But in video, you're actually keeping up with inflation. And if just normal inflation, that product would cost almost $1,300. But with video, you're surpassing the inflation rate. So that just proves to you right there, you've got to learn video. Video, video, video. Now, what's the problem with learning video? Well, okay, let's get to the main point of this lecture, okay? And why I wanted to do this lecture is that priority one should be video. You should shoot video first. And I'm like preaching to the choir here, because like I know it, but I don't always do it, but I'm trying to do it more and more, because two, you can pull the stills from that. So your workflow, right? You create the video and then extract stills from the video. And so it's a much more, the workflow is killing two birds with one stone, right? So here's the problem with shooting video. Now, remind you, all these stills that you see are extracted from video, just to let you know, okay? So stills, it's fairly easy camera setup in terms of getting the quality that you want. First, it's the resolution, right? And most of us, we set it on the highest resolution of whatever our camera is, whether it's 24 megapixels, 32 or 61. That's what we set it at. And two, we only got two options, right? Shoot it in JPEG or shoot it in RAW. Most people shoot in RAW, but you know, honestly, I've been shooting JPEG my entire life. So I haven't had one, and I've had my photos published all over the world, all in magazines, and not one publisher ever said to me, "Oh my gosh, you shot this photo in JPEG. I can totally tell." They can't tell, right? So I've been shooting everything in JPEG. In fact, I wrote up article in F-Stoppers about it. It's got like big old controversy. But anyways, so it's fairly easy. Only two things you have to worry about to get the video quality, get the still quality. But this is the reason why people are so scared of video, okay? Here's all the things you have to know to get the highest video quality out of your camera. One, of course, is the resolution. Do I shoot in HD, full HD, 4K, 8K now, right? That's fairly easy. Two, frames per second, right? And that changes the quality of the video. And that's kind of complicated because if you want it to look cinematic, then you should have it at a certain frame rate. And there's all these different rules. And that's even complicated in which frame rate to shoot it in. But we'll go over all this. Don't worry about it. The shutter speed. So even the shutter speed is different too and has different effect to it. And you have to know, what usually people use the 180-degree rule, which I'll get into. And that's even hard. Then there's bit rate and compression. Like when you pull up video settings on your Sony camera, there's going to have like a bunch of different options on what kind of compression do you want to, because basically if you shoot the videos raw, they're so huge that they have to compress it down or else these video files will be too huge for you. So they need to compress it and they want to know what type of compression you want. And then different qualities of bit rate. What do you want? And there's so many options on that. And then on top of that, you have the color bit depth. How do you want to capture the color? Do you want 8-bit, 10-bit, 16-bit? If you have a super pro camera, cinema camera, what's the difference between all those? Can I get away with 8-bit or should I use 10-bit? What does it mean? Then on top of that, there's color sampling. You ever heard of this? Like 444, 422, 420. It's like, what the? I didn't even know what that stuff was. I had to look it up. Like they're talking like, some foreign language to me. I didn't understand what, I love it because it's 422 and I was shooting 420 before. I had no idea what that meant. Then on top of that, there's picture profiles. Like when you're shooting video, they have like, 11 or 13 of them. And like, which picture profile do you choose? Like, what do you even need a picture profile? What's a lot? All these different things. And then on top of that, I used to just buy the cheapest SD cards out because for stills, you could use a V30 card and no problem. But now when you start shooting video, you put that card in, you set a certain video setting, you go, sorry, but I can't record on this card. It's not good enough. Right? It's like, oh my gosh, now I got to buy all new cards. Which one should I get? Do you have to buy the super, super expensive kind or can I get away with that? Look at that. That's the reason why video is difficult because the quality changes according to all these little things. And I'm going to briefly go through what these mean. And at the end, I'm going to show you the magic settings. So even if you don't even listen to this part, you can get my magic settings, set it on that. You should be good to go. And that's what's very difficult. So the first thing, let's talk about resolution. Is video resolution good enough for stills? So you can see here, if you're at full HD, that's a 2-megapixel still. If you're at 4K, that's an 8-megapixel still. And then if you're at 8K, that's a 32-megapixel still, which is quite amazing. And everything is going to 8K. So now, is that good enough? Well, for social media, if you look on social media, what highest resolution they need, they really only need full HD, which is a 2-megapixel file. That's all you need. So for video, for doing social media, if you do just basically social media, you will only have to shoot in full HD, really. Or you could shoot in 4K and crop the heck out of it. So let's look at an Instagram reel. That is the dimensions and the pixel dimensions of an Instagram reel, which is full HD. So if I was shooting a 4K video, and let's say I didn't want to turn it portrait, I just wanted to keep it landscape, there's so much resolution there. I could just crop the middle and I would have plenty of resolution for the reel, even shooting it the wrong orientation with 4K. Or I could, flip it and shoot it up and down portrait, and then I could crop half of it or more than half of it and still have enough resolution for an Instagram reel. So for basically, if you're just doing mostly posting on social media, for sure, video can do the job for you. Now, is it good enough for print? That is the key question. Okay, so I'm going to have to pull out my 2003. This is my 2003 portfolio. We're talking 20 years ago. Okay, so now 20 years ago, people doubted whether or not digital was good as film. And believe it or not, I lost jobs because I shot digital and I didn't shoot film, and I lost jobs. So back then, people were very like, I don't know about this digital thing. I just trust film. So what I had to do was print these huge pictures of digital files to show my client and say, look at this is digital. Look at these huge photos that I made from it, to show my clients. I'd bring this into a meeting. And I'm going to show you that these photos, I still have them. You look at them, you can't tell whether what resolution these were shot at, other than the quality of my work. Actually, it's 20 years old, still looks decent, I guess. But let me show you the resolution of these files. That first photo on the left, that was from a 4-megapixel camera, then 6-megapixel camera, 6-megapixel camera. So 4K is 8 megapixels. So you don't really have, if you have, and how many of us is print? When's the last time you guys printed something, right? If you ever had to print something, you still can make some great files. And let me show you, extracting stills are good enough for about 90% of our work, if not all of it, honestly. Okay. So if you're doing just full HD, which is a 2.1 megapixel file, you should be able to no problem print an 8x10, 10 by 5 out of it. I've actually taken that file and printed a 20 by 10 inch print from a 2 megapixel file. I've done it. I've sold it professionally. I've looked at it. You can't tell the freaking difference, honestly, when you're looking at it with the naked eye. Now, if you go up to 4K, you should be able to technically print a 26-inch by 15, but I'm always stretching it. I've printed 20 by 30 prints off of that sucker, because I know I've taken 6-megapixel files and printed 30 by 20 engagement prints all the time, and it was fine. You can't even tell. Now, if you have 8K, it's over. It's a 32 megapixel file. You can print any size, no problem. So the thing is, though, not all 4K recording devices are good enough. Yes, the resolution is fine, but there's so many other quality factors in the devices that record 4K. Not everyone can do a great job. And we're going to get into that and discuss the quality factors. Okay, so first is frames per second. And what is frames per second? So basically, video is a bunch of still images just shot very quickly, like 24 frames in 1 second. And so it tricks your eye thinking it's motion, but it's not really motion. It's just a bunch of still frames. So that's what video is. Now, it's just like a flip book, right? So you look at a flip book, that's what video is. And your camera's capturing all those images and putting it together to create. So that's simply what video is. So if you want video to look realistic, meaning you play the video and it looks like how you see things in real life, basically you have a capture frame rate. That's what captures what you use. That's the capture of what your camera or device does, that frame rate. So there's that frame rate, and that has to equal the frame rate that you're going to create your presentation in. If you're going to presentation, or what they call a timeline, or the project frame rate. So for example, if I capture in 16 frames per second, like in the old days, which silent movies did, I play it back in 16 frames per second, then it's going to look like real life. And these were silent pictures. Silent pictures were shot in 16 frames per second. And that's what that look is. Now, they moved up to 24 frames per second, which is known as the cinematic. This is like the standard for the cinematic look. So what happens is when they added audio, the audio had to keep up, the frames had to keep up with the mouth and the sound. So you can't have your mouth moving and not sound come out of it, or sound coming out and your mouth not moving. So it had to match. So they had to speed the frame rate up to match it. And so that's where they got 24 frames per second. But now, they shoot 30 frames per second. So if you shoot 30 frames per second, you play it back in 30 frames per second, it's going to have that realistic documentary. A lot of people like on YouTube use this. It's a little smoother than 24 frames per second, but it's a little bit more realistic. Then they have even 60 frames per second, which is a little bit more detailed. If you're showing action, a lot of people shoot at a higher frame rate. They've even done movies at 120 frames per second, which is kind of like with super realistic. And if you're doing fast action, then you want to film in that. And so I'm going to show you a little example of what 60 frames per second and what 30 frames. There's hardly a little bit of a difference, but you can see at the top frame, see how much sharper it is? The resolution is the same, but because you're shooting more frames per second, it's a little bit sharper. Okay, so that's a difference. It's not a huge difference, but it is a difference. And so I just wanted to show you that. Now, this is when it gets a little bit more complicated when you want to do creative video. Meaning that the capture frame rate in your camera doesn't have to equal the presentation frame rate, which is the timeline or the project frame rate. For example, if you started with the very basic cinematic frame rate, which is 24 frames per second, that gives you that cinematic look. But let's say you record in 30 frames per second, a little bit faster than 24 frames, and you play it back in 24 frames per second timeline, that video will look 80% slower because you captured more frames. And that's how you do slow motion. Now, that's why you shoot at 60 frames per second. If you play it back in 24 frames per second timeline, it's 2.5 times slower. Now, if you shoot it at 120 frames per second, it's actually 5.5 times slower. Now, if you want to kind of see water droplets moving very slow, or you're doing very fast action, like someone's going up and slam dunking a basket, you want to slow it down and show that action video. That's what a lot of people shoot at 120 or even faster. Now, you can also go the opposite way where you can under frame it, right? So like if you want to create that 8mm film look, you could record it at a slower speed, like 16 frames per second or 18 frames per second, and play it back at 24 frames per second. But you're going, Scott, like, wait a second. You got 16 frames. How does it make 24 frames if you under? I could see if you're over, right? You could stretch out the timeline, or you could actually pull frames out of it. But what do you do? So basically you're missing 6 frames per second. So what it does is it duplicates some of the frames, and that's why it looks jittery, because on some frames you're getting 2 frames of the same motion, which creates that jitteriness, right? So that's why if you want to reproduce, and now see a lot of videos where they do that vintage style and they mess up the video and make it look old, but then I look at it and go, well, that's way, way too smooth, is because they didn't lower the frame rate. Okay, so, oh, sorry, I messed up. So then you could shoot it at 1 frame per second. And what do? People shoot it at 1 frame per second and they get time lapse, right? So let's show examples. So see here, this is a reason why you would want to shoot it at a faster frame rate. So this 30 frames per second, you could slow it down, but if you capture it, look at the Cheerios or Fruit Loops coming out that. They look all long and it doesn't look right. Whereas if you shoot at a faster frame rate, you're going to catch that. So let's look at that video there. See, doesn't that look much better in 120? But you have to understand, oh yeah, I'm shooting fast action. I need to move the frame rate up. Okay, and here's an old movie at slow, right? This is actually literally an 8mm film. You see how that looks a little bit jittery, especially when you move it it doesn't seem very smooth, and that's 18 frames per second. That's what that looks like. Now, let's do 1 frame per second, and you can see that's when you can create time-lapse images because you're stretching out the time. So you're shooting it 24 times, but it's only representing 1 second in video. And so that's how you do time-lapse. So that's the difference in using frames per second. Now there's also shutter speed. So then once you get your mind around that, then you have to figure out what shutter speed is. And you can use, to start off with, is the general 180 rule, which kind of creates the shutter speed not too fast or not too slow. So the problem is when you have your shutter speed really, really fast, everything looks too sharp and too realistic. And so that's why you need a little bit of blurriness in that background just to make it look more cinema style. So you gotta like, well, it can't be too fast or it can't be too slow, just how you saw the Fruit Loops. So what is the formula? And here's, I'm going to show you, right? So you're shooting this fan and you do it at 1/13 of a second and you don't even hardly see the fan. And that's too curvy. 1/50th looks right there. And then 200 maybe too realistic to look. So you have one side where it's too slow and one side it's too fast. How do I pick the right shutter speed? Well, guess what? Scott Robert Lim is here to tell you a simple formula on how to figure it out. So you just use the 180 shutter rule. Basically, you put your shutter speed at twice the frames per second. Okay, so for example, if you're shooting 24 frames per second, then you put your shutter speed at 1/48th of a second, but you don't have 1/48th of a second, not unless you have a super high-end cinema camera, then you can. But for us normal people who have general cameras, you can get 150. That's close enough. If you're shooting at 30 frames per second, put it at 1/60th. You put it at 60 frames per second, you put it at 1/20th, and so forth. Now, for capturing stills, or if you do fast action, let's say you're doing some running or jumping and you want to catch that fast action, you might have to put it at a higher shutter speed. Now, the ideal shutter speed, I feel like, and frame rate would be this right here. Because one, if you shoot at 60 frames per second, you could do some great slow-mo if you put it in a slower timeline. Also, if you double the frame rate, now your shutter is at 1/20th of a second. And for doing portraits, that's the shutter speed to keep things tight and sharp in general. When you're shooting a portrait, if you're over 1/100th of a second, you should be pretty good. Okay, so that's what the sweet spot is, and that's what I shoot. So it basically freezes the portraits of still, but also gives you the slow motion action. And then also when the camera is moving and showing motion, it blurs it enough so it looks natural too. So that is the sweet spot there on your shutter speed. So now there's times when you kind of have to break that rule, especially when you're doing action. And so look at this, right? It's 120 frames per second. If you do the 180 rule, it should be at 1/250th of a second. But look at how the lemon looks. It's not stopping the action fast enough. So if you turn it to 1/500th of a second, you can stop the action. Now, if you were trying to pull a still with that, right? Maybe you might need it at 1,000th of a second, right? If you were to, pull a still, then you do it. Okay. Right? So if you were to stop it right there and pull that still, you still might need it even faster than that. So you can break those rules depending on what you're doing and what you're filming, but that'll just get you started. Okay, so now there's bit depth, right? And so you'll see things in your camera and say, well, do you want to record this at 8-bit or you want to record this at 10-bit? What the heck does that mean? That's color depth. And so I'm going to give you an example. 8-bit is at the top. And so it represents those colors. It's not as graduated, whereas 10-bit has a lot more information. So at 8-bit, I believe there's like 256 shades per pixel. And then at 10-bit, there's like something like 1,000,000 shades per pixel. It's something ridiculous like that. The file size is a lot bigger. But you know what? I've been shooting JPEG my entire life. And so I've been shooting my stills in 8-bit for 23 years, and I've never had a problem with it. So even if you have 8-bit, guys, don't worry. That's fine. It's still very good. 10-bit is great. You get better color rendition with 10-bit. Okay. So go with 10-bit if you got it. But if not, don't sweat it. You're still good with 8-bit. You still can do this. Okay. So now that's the bit depth. Now they have something called the bit rate. I know your mind is going crazy right now, but don't worry. I'm going to give you the magic formula so you don't even have to understand all this stuff, and you can be able to shoot and grab stills. Okay. What is bit rate? That is the encoded data per second. How much data is being recorded onto your SD card per second? And they have different types of quality, right? And so all 4K recordings are not equal. So when you get a lower end, low cost product that shoots 4K, I guarantee you the bit rate is not going to be as quality as a more expensive camera. So think of it as internet speed. Okay. So let's say, you're downloading, you're watching Netflix. Okay. And you got your Netflix and this kind of image shows up. What are you saying to yourself? Oh my gosh, my internet is so slow, right? So that's when the bit rate is too low to recreate the image that is presented. And so when the internet is faster, it will have more data flow through so you could get that quality image. Your camera is the same way. It needs to. So the more internet bit rate, the higher quality image you can get. And so generally, when you're shooting 4K 30, it needs at least 45 megabits per second minimum to recreate 4K. Okay, so that's what's needed to so that's why a lot of the internet services, the minimum is 100 megabits per second, because if you want to like download and look at and stream 4K video, you're going to have to need at least 45 megabits per second. So let's talk about camera settings now, okay, and knowing this information. So basically, when you pull your camera up, they're going to have these different compressions, right? And so in Sony, they make it super complicated because they have a XAVC before the compression, but that's all the same. The only thing you have to worry about are the letters after you see the XVC. And if you see a HS, that means a high compression, meaning they're going to compress that a lot, make it a smaller file for you, but you're going to get less quality. And those, it's usually recorded in something called H.265. H.265 can be worked with, but with the newer technology. So if you have an older computer, like you're using an i5 system or an i7 or something like that, H.265, it will have a harder time decompressing and working with those types of files. But if you have a new M1 or your iPhone with the new processor, they can handle that no problem. Then they have a little bit lower, what I call a standard or a medium compression, which is H.264, which can be processed by pretty much any computer. It's a lot easier, and it's less compressed, so the quality is a little bit higher. Then they have something that it's a low compression, but the file size is huge. It's 3 times the medium size, and not very many people recording that. Maybe if you're photographing a cinematic movie or something like that, maybe you'll do that. And this is an H.264. But what's great about that, because it's not compressed a lot, if you have a super old computer, say an i5 or something like that, this might be a good way to shoot in, because your computer can handle it because it's not compressed as much. Okay, that's what I use. Medium compression. That's the way to go. In Canon, I believe they have something called all I or something. All I means the low compression, super huge files. And then they have something called IPS or something like that. That's the medium one. I think that's what everybody records at. So I don't know the different camera brands. They have different compression names. I have no what I just know Sony. Okay, so this is what I recorded. XAVS in 4K at 60 frames per second. When you see the P, that means frames per second at 200 megabits per second. Okay, so that 200 megabits per second, your SD card needs to be able to handle that bit rate. Okay, so your camera will say, if you want to record in this setting, you have to use what they call a V60 card. Okay, the lowest card is V30. The next highest is a V60. What does that 60 mean? Well, that 60 means that card guarantees a write speed of 60 megabytes per second, not megabits per second. They make it all confusing for you. They do this on purpose. So you just buy the highest quality card because you don't know any better, but I'm going to explain things to you. If you see a capital B, that means that rate, so you see the 60 there, but you see a capital B. And so look at the tough card there. It says 150 MB capital B. That means it's 8 times. If you multiply it by 8, that's the megabits per second. So basically, a V60 guarantees 480 megabits per second. If I'm only required 200 megabits per second, 480 is more than enough. That card will work. And so if I buy a 256 gig card, that guarantees me almost 3 hours of recording on that one card. Okay, so that's why if you have certain settings and you try to use your old cards, they may not work because it's not fast enough, but that's how you figure out what card to use. Now, why is a GoPro? You use a GoPro, it records at 4K 120, but it uses the lowest cost quality card. I could put the cheapo cards in my GoPro, but it records 4K 420. But if I try to record 4K 120 on my fancy camera, it says that low quality card won't work. Why is it? It's because of the bit rate. A GoPro at 4K 120 only uses 100 megabits per second. That's why you could put the cheap V30 card in there. So what does the 30 mean? 30 is the megabytes per second. So if I multiply by the 8, that is a speed of a minimum speed of 240 megabits per second. And since I'm only recording at 100 megabits per second, it's fine. So the bit depth has a lot to do with the quality of card that you need and the quality of image. Now, if you look at your iPhone, the iPhone only records at 55 megabits per second. So even though it's 4K, right, on the iPhone, you go, well, I'm shooting 4K on my phone. I don't need to shoot on a big expensive camera because I got 4K on my phone. Well, yeah, it's only a 55 megabits per second, whereas even a GoPro has twice the quality of an iPhone 4K video. Okay, so that's that explained. Okay, now here's another thing is colors. Yeah, I know you're going out of your mind. That's what I was when I was learning video. I'm like, I'm going insane. What are all these things mean? And then I see this 444, 442, 440. What is this? Well, this is the way that the camera samples color. Okay, and they have different methods doing it. Let's start off with the 444. What does it mean? So what it does is if it has 8 pixels, that first 4 means it's recording all the luminance, the brightness of all those 8 pixels and recording individually in each pixel the amount of luminance or brightness in that pixel. Okay. Then the second number means is that it's going to record all 4 pixels in that first layer of information, or those first 4 pixels. And then the second number means how many it's sampling of the second, right? And so when you blend both of those colors and those samples together, you get the bottom, and that's what goes into your camera, okay? Now, 444 requires a lot of data, and I don't even think I have a camera that can record 444. That's for like cinema studio cameras you paid a buttload of money for. You can get that, okay? But the newer cameras have this 422. What does that mean? The first number's recording all the luminance. The second number you see is 2. Well, it's only taking 2 of those pixels that it finds on the second layer, and then it just duplicates that to the next one. And that's how you get the 4. And then on this, what's the next 2? On the second layer, it records 2 of the pixels and duplicates it. And then it blends the top luminance with those pixels, and then you get the resultant on the bottom. Okay, so you can see the difference between the colors there. Now, this is common, 420. What does that mean? Well, you can start to figure it out. 4, you get all the luminance on the top of all the pixels. Then on the second layer, you just get 2 pixels, which records on both, but you don't get any on the bottom layer, and they just duplicate the pixels on the top. But when you mix it with the luminance, you still get a varying of type of photos, and it's still pretty good. So if you look at the bottom results of the 422 and the 420, they're about the same, right? The only huge differences you're going to see is in the 444, which is for cinema cameras. That's if you're shooting a major motion picture, then you're going to do 444, right? But if you're just like the top tier pro cameras have 422, which is excellent. But even if you have 420, don't feel bad, right? You don't be a pixel peeper. It's still very, very good and usable. Trust me, just try it out. Maybe if you do a green screen on that 420, it might not be that great, but in general, it's actually very, very good, because if you look at the bottom, there's not much variance in what you capture. And so that's what those ratios mean. I use that. My camera has that, so that's what I use. Okay, this is 50% less file size, and if you actually use this, it's even 25% less, so it's a lot smaller. Okay, so we're getting near to the end here. Thanks for hanging in. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I'll just plow through this. Now, the last thing that's going to drive you crazy is, oh my gosh, what's a picture profile? Like I go up there, there's like 13 different picture profiles, and you have no idea what's what. So I'm going to tell you what to choose. There's basically 3 things that you can do. Okay, you got 3 choices. Okay, so there's no profile, which is fine, and which is great. Then there's S-Cinetone if you have a Sony, a newer camera, which is very good, which I highly recommend. And then there's S-Log3. Okay, so when would you choose these? Well, let's say you've got a fast turnaround and you don't want to do you want to just do it in camera, basically. Whatever you see in cameras, whatever you can get, need fast turnaround. Don't even use a profile, just get it right in camera and go for it, output it, and then edit it slightly, and then you're done. Now, if you want a preset that's already done for you, then you might want to try S-Cinetone, because it's actually a preset that cooks it for you and say, hey, you've wanted this to look like the movies, choose this preset, and it's less post-processing. It's a slightly flatter file, so it has a little bit more dynamic range. It has a warmer feel to it. And when you set it in this preset, you can go down to ISO 100. Now, S-Log3 is super popular, but is very versatile, but it is super flat. If you pull a still out of S3 log video, it looks like crap. You can't even give it to your client because it is so flat looking. But so it must be post-processed. but it is very good at retaining highlights and details. It's kind of in a way like shooting in RAW, right? So if you're a RAW shooter and you want to post-process anything anyways, shoot in S-Log3. The one downside is that you can't use any lower than ISO 640 on it. And those are the 3 different ones. So, I'm going to experiment shooting in all of them, but a lot of times I'm just in no profile at all, and I'm shooting it. Those are the images that you saw. I didn't choose a profile. I might have been in S-Cinetone on a couple of them. Okay, so here's S-Log3. So you could see on the left, look at how much detail it pulls out of there. It's totally edited. Oh, I forgot to go to what a LUT is. So you call these things called LUT. What is it called? A lookup table. So what are those? Those are presets, color presets, color grading. You can buy them. They're like Lightroom presets, and it already does it for you, and it colorizes the photo so you can have a consistent look on all your video clips, because it will tone it, color grade it according to that LUT. You can make your own, or you can buy some and put it in, and so you can copy it. So if you're doing an S3 log, a lot of people use LUTs. They're like presets in Lightroom. That's the same thing. Okay, so here it is, S3. Look at all the detail. Look at all you can pull back and get on it, and color shade it any way you can. This is Cinetone right out of camera, and it looks just like that right out of camera. So those are the 2 different things. Okay, that's it. So before I summarize everything, and maybe there's a few questions if anybody's there, I am coming to town. I'm going to B&H, and I'm doing a photo walk. So be sure to sign up for that. July 11th, we're going to do some lecture inside B&H there. And then we're going to go out and after shoot in Central Park. Also, I'm going to be in Cuba. If you want to come to Cuba with me, October 11th through 16th, I'm doing a workshop there. Go to scottrobertstudio.com and you can find that. Go to B&H Studios. I'll also put the link in my scottrobertstudio.com, which is my link tree there, and you can sign up for that too. Okay, so here's the magic settings, and then I'll be done with it, and maybe there's a few questions. If not, so here you could go, if you don't even understand all that stuff, go straight down to this, set this, and you should be good to go by getting the best quality for your imagery. Okay, 1, choose the medium compression, X AVC S, not HS. So when you see that on there, what kind of you want? That's going to blow your mind how many options there are. Just choose that one. I shoot it in 4K there. Then what's my frame rate? I'm shooting in 60 frames per second. I select that. And then what's my record setting? See, it has different qualities. I want the higher quality at 200 megabits per second at 422 at 10 bit. Now, see, what's the amazing things is that those numbers before that, this lecture could be completely a different language to you. It could be completely Greek, unless you know Greek. Like, what the heck does that mean? But now you can look at those numbers and you know exactly what each one of those settings means and if or not you want to use it. And then the card that I use, the main thing is V60. That gets me where I want to go. And that's what I use. And so what's my camera settings? I set it there. My shutter speed is at 120, right? I double the frame rate. Then I control the exposure by 1. I control the ISO. 2, I could buy an ND filter, which is another discussion in itself. Or 3, I could change my f-stop to control my exposure. And then also 4, if I'm doing super fast action and I want to make sure I get a still image, I'll have to raise my shutter speed for fast action. Now, my recommendation for you too is to not overwhelm you. Just hit the freaking video record on your camera, see what comes out of it, and try to do it. But you're going to eventually, if you want to do pro quality recording, you're going to have to know all these settings, and you can probably even review this lecture again. But at least this will get you started. And so now I'm going to stop me. And if there's any kind of questions out there, I'll be happy to answer them.
Everyone's probably out there scratching their head right now, like, hey, hold on, I got to review this.
Yeah, it's a lot of
It's a
stuff.
lot. It's a lot of information, and especially when we're talking to a crowd of still photographers, who are going to benefit from this video settings. It's like, what? Like I just learned
Yeah.
all of the technical aspect of stills, and now I got to learn video as well. Luckily for everyone out there, look, we can watch this video over and over. It will be archived.
Yes.
And take screen grabs, take notes, whatever works best. We did have a question coming from Dave joining us on Facebook, asking about S-Log if you have to use a camera preset, such as in a Sony A7R III. So yes, I'll let you dive into it further, Scott, but this is where I guess the best analogy people can relate for shooting in log is shooting in RAW when you're shooting stills.
Yes.
You're giving yourself the most latitude, the most data. You get that. That's if you guys ever see those videos that it's just a very flat, non-contrasty image. That's what you're getting in S-Log. So S-Log is just a format. And that's why Scott says you will need, if you take a screen grab from a video that is shot in shooting log or S-Log, you will have to process that image. Did I miss anything there, Scott?
No, that's right. It's
so I was
super flat and versatile, but you will have to post-process your image in S-Log 3.
Yes. Dave's asking, which Sony body are you using? Now, Scott, he's asking for those settings. Now, are there any that you know of? I mean, obviously, we're not going to go into every single camera, but on most of the Alpha series, you have the ability to shoot in log.
Oh, yeah. I would say the most popular log that a lot of cinematographers like to shoot is an S-Log 3. I find that a lot of people like to shoot in S-Log 3 because it gives you the most versatility. It is the most flattest image, but if you're going to do heavy color grading or you want to just do something funky to it, S-Log 3 allows you to do that. If you're lazy and you just want to have that cinema look, put it in that S Cinetone preset number 11 on Sony. They just added it to all the new cameras. And it's very popular and it looks pretty cool. So try it.
Yeah, it's definitely something you're going to want to play around with. Everybody's going to have a different vibe, a different feel. And some people want to do less work. Some people don't mind doing a little extra work. Have a Sid here on Vimeo asking, can you explain a little bit more on the 422 versus 420? I got that the first number relates to luminance, but what do the second and third relate to?
Okay, so let's see here. Let's go back into that where I explain all that crap. It's a little bit complicated. Let me hit the play button here so I can show you. So, well, see, let's go with the 444, right? The first 4 talks about the luminance. It records all the brightness of those 8 pixels. The second number relates to the first 4 pixels of the 8. And how many pixels is it recording the true color? So in a 444, the first 4 pixels are recording exactly what the true color is, and the second 4 is recording the second 4 exactly what the color is. And then you blend those two. So if you add the luminance to the 4 colors that it sampled, you get the resulting tone that's being recorded in your camera. Okay, does that make sense? Now, if you go to 422, you get the luminance. You get all 8 pixels of each pixel is going to be a different luminance. It'll record each of those individually because luminance is far easier to see than color difference. And that's why luminance is the most important. Then the 2 represents on that first layer of 4, it's only going to record 2 of the pixels. So if you look to the left, it chooses the first pixel and the third pixel. But what it does is if it picks the first pixel, it's just going to copy that to the next pixel. And then when it chooses the second pixel, it's just going to copy that one to the next pixel. So you still get 4 pixels, but only 2 of them are chosen. And then the second number is the other 2 is the second layer, the third of that ratio. It's only going to pick 2 again and then copy that pixel to the next one. And so when you blend the luminance with the color, then that's what you get is the bottom frame there of all those colors. Now, if you go to 420, you get the luminance again, but it's only going to choose 2 pixels from that top layer of 4 pixels. And then it's going to copy the rest down to the bottom. And it's not going to choose any of those bottom on the bottom. It's just going to copy what's on top. And then when you blend it with the luminance, it's going to look like that on the bottom. So you could see the difference between 422 and 420. You still get the brightness aspect to it, but the colors might be slightly off. But it's not a huge difference in color when it comes down to it. So it's kind of like pixel peeping, but if you need to know what it is, then that's what it is. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've had a couple people asking. One example here, June is shooting with a A9 II and can't shoot 60 frames per second, is only has the option to shoot 24p. And then Dave asking about which Sony bodies you would recommend for going with that 422. What are we looking at if somebody only has the ability to shoot 24p or 30p? Are they losing out much, or is there certain scenarios where they're not going to be?
Honestly, you're pixel peeping at this point. Like I said, I shoot JPEG stills, which is less quality than what I'm talking about right now. Okay, JPEG, when you shoot in JPEG with your camera, it's only 8-bit. So I've been shooting 8-bit my entire career, right? Now, if you raise your shutter speed, let's say you don't have 60 frames per second. That's a good question. Just raise your shutter speed if you have to 120 and look at the video. You're doing Instagram reels or whatever. Nobody's really going to know it. Maybe if you're shooting a major motion picture or you're doing something that's 5 minutes long or 10 minutes long, people can notice the difference, but it's okay to raise. I know Sony artisans that disregard shutter speed at all. If they're in bright light and they have to shoot at 8,000ths of a second at their shutter speed, they just do it. And it even, so go, what if I need to really blur? So if they have to blur the background and it looks too sharp, then they just put it through software that will blur it for them if they really have to. And so it's not a big thing. The big thing is just start doing it. Ignorance is bliss, like I wish I didn't get into this stuff, but I wanted to teach it because in the beginning, I just hit the video record button on my camera and started recording it and pulling frames. I didn't even know about any of this stuff until I started talking to people on video. I didn't want to feel like I was an idiot and didn't know what 422 is, so that's really the only reason why. So I would say if you don't have it, still do it. You'll be surprised at what you can pull out of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think sometimes we get caught up in the settings and the numbers and the technical aspect. And the whole point of doing this is really you're basically, it's another way to take images, right? It's another way to somebody just cut loose. It's no different than saying, hey, I want you to just dance around and I'm just going to sit there clicking off a bunch of frames.
Right.
You're still clicking off a bunch of frames. You're just doing it in a different.
But the thing is when you do that, people want Instagram reels, don't they? So this way you do it in video and you got both. You're catching 2 birds with one hand, right? Definitely. I kind of want to go back to this slide here showing people that you can still make amazing prints from 6 megapixels.
Totally.
I've done it.
I love the picture on the right because it's that the scaling gives you an idea of you know,
If I showed you those photos, you would have no idea what megapixel camera. If I said that was shot in 2003, you'd be like, oh, wow, really? I mean, my photo skill quality has changed and maybe, up the level a bit. But I mean, just in terms of quality or whatever, like, heck, I don't know. Could have shot that yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Scott is getting across to us is just have fun with it. Go out there, experiment. You're going to see as you start changing your settings around. Some of these settings are going to be for more advanced applications or people who might have a more demanding use. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is splitting hairs. Putting, obviously you have to learn the information, right? You can't come in here and say, just do whatever. You have to have some basis on which to found the principles and say, hey, this is what this does. This is what this does. But at the end of the day,
you grow into that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's like you said, hit the video button. For those a camera that has a little dedicated video record button, hit the record button, pull the video up on your computer and do, maximize.
Mess around, have fun.
Go frame by frame. Go frame by frame. If you're able to shoot 120 frames a second, record something 120 frames a second. You might be surprised that in between a series of blurry, I guess, stills, you'll find that one and you're like, wow, it really
You'll be surprised. Just like when I shot that little flower with the bee on it, less than 2 second clip. And wow, I was able to pull that from the frame. It's like, whoa, I wouldn't have been able to shoot that with stills. No way.
Definitely. Well, Scott, if nothing else, you've piqued our curiosity and made a lot more people want to look into this idea of using video for stills. So we thank you for that. You're always pushing the bar and always bringing us expertise and entertainment, enjoyment. It's always good to have you on. You got the good energy flowing, man. So I encourage everybody out there, try it. Like we said, don't get caught up in the settings. Put it in video mode. Take a video, pull it up on your computer, go frame by frame. Take a still here and there. And I think what you'll find is that if you are somebody who gets hung up on sharpness and pixel peaking, there is emotion in motion. And it's a beautiful thing. Some of your greatest captures you're going to find are not the ones that are the sharpest, are the ones with the highest pixel count or megapixel count. It's the ones that you just feel. You look at them and you feel something. So go out there, shoot, have fun with it, feel something. And while you're at it, throw Scott Robert Lim a follow on Instagram. Check his work out, see what workshops he has coming up. And we'll be sure to get him back on here on the B&H event space in the near future if he's can make some time for it. And maybe what else you can push the envelope on, Scott.
What's that?
We're going to see what else you can push the envelope.
Tons of stuff.
There we go. That's the answer we wanted. Well, huge thank you to Scott for joining us as always, and for Sony for hosting this wonderful event. To all of our viewers out there, thank you. If you guys have not already done so, check us out on YouTube at B&H Event Space. And we will see you guys tomorrow for another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. Have a nice evening, everyone.